Shut your mouth, Doc. With that body, you really think you're cutting open anybody's brain? People like you shouldn't even touch a scalpel. He didn't know the woman he was humiliating was the same little girl he once begged for help, now a neurosurgeon who had saved his life decades earlier. Before we start the story, tell me, where are you watching from? And if these stories speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Shut your mouth, Doc. You don't belong in that uniform. You think you're one of them heroes? Step aside before I show you what happens to people like you. Olivia Freeman froze for a heartbeat, the words hitting her like a punch straight to the gut. Exhausted from a brutal 14-hour shift, body aching, scrubs wrinkled but neat, she had walked into countless hospitals and faced plenty of challenges. But hearing a grown man, a paramedic no less, spout such blatant ignorance in her face, that stung in a way fatigue never could. Her bag swung lightly over her shoulder, the weight of it almost symbolic, carrying not just surgical tools, but years of training, late nights in med school, residency hours she couldn't even begin to count. And yet, here he was, standing like some self-appointed judge, sneering as if he had the right to measure her worth by her appearance. The audacity made her blood boil, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Her hands stayed steady, fingers brushing the strap of her bag as she stepped forward, chin high. The emergency room buzzed around her, carts rolling across linoleum floors, monitors beeping incessantly, a nurse screaming orders down the hall, med students darting about with wide eyes and half-formed questions. It was chaos, the kind of chaos that either broke people or brought them to focus. Olivia fell into focus. Every step down the hall reminded her why she endured the late nights, the grueling shifts, the subtle and sometimes blatant prejudice that tried to shake her confidence. Behind her, a young nurse she had personally trained, Ava, watched nervously from across the room. Olivia could read her worry like an open book, concern for her own safety, for the fight that was about to come. Olivia offered a small, reassuring nod, trying to silently tell her, "I got this." Not that it mattered to the paramedic, who continued to flail his ignorance with every word. Frank Williams, an older orderly, who had been working at that hospital longer than Olivia had been alive, noticed the smirk before Olivia did. Calm but firm, he stepped in, blocking the paramedic with his body, voice steady yet authoritative. "Yo, back off," Frank said, eyes locked on the man. "Skills ain't measured by your waistline, buddy. This is Dr. Freeman, top of her class, saved more lives than you've probably seen in your lifetime. You don't get to disrespect that." The paramedic faltered just a fraction, like a pause before the next ignorant word could leave his mouth. Olivia felt a small, satisfying surge of vindication. The room's energy shifted subtly. Nurses and doctors, previously focused on their tasks, glanced over, some whispering among themselves, shaking their heads at the audacity, others pulling out phones, likely to capture the moment. But Olivia didn't care about proving him wrong in front of everyone. She cared about the patient waiting just down the hall, whose life was in her hands. She rolled up her sleeves, adjusted her mask, and let her mind snap into surgical mode. Every step she took toward the patient room echoed with purpose, her boots clicking on the polished floor. The whispers of her colleagues followed her, a mix of awe, curiosity, and disbelief that someone could carry themselves with such calm in the middle of blatant disrespect. Each step reminded her of the countless times she had been underestimated, overlooked, or mocked for being black, for being a woman, for being anyone society decided to doubt. But Olivia also carried a secret, a quiet reminder of why she never faltered under ignorance. Years ago, she had been the one to save a child's life during a catastrophic accident. That child, barely old enough to remember the trauma, was standing right there in the ER now, the very paramedic spewing venom. Completely unaware of who she was, he thought he was calling the shots, thinking his words could shake her. Little did he know, the doctor he mocked had already saved his life once. The irony tasted sweet and dangerous at the same time. Her eyes flicked over the room. The monitors, the IV bags, the beeping machines, the frantic movement of medical staff. Each item, a reminder of the gravity of her job. The paramedic's words tried to invade her focus, but she pushed them aside. She had trained her whole life to compartmentalize, to maintain clarity under pressure, to operate in situations where chaos reigned and lives hung in the balance. And this was just background noise. Ava stayed close, her small hand clinging to Olivia's, eyes wide as she watched the interaction. Olivia could feel the tension radiating off her daughter, and a pang of guilt struck her. She hated that Ava had to witness this. Hate that the world still had people who judged others by appearances instead of ability. But she also knew that this was a lesson in resilience, a lesson in dignity, one that Ava would never forget. Frank Williams gave her a small nod, almost imperceptible, and Olivia responded with a subtle smile. Strength didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was standing tall while the ignorant screamed. And sometimes it was letting skill and talent speak louder than words. She approached the patient's room, heart steady, mind sharp. The paramedic had gone silent, uncertain now, realizing he had miscalculated. Olivia's focus never wavered. Years of experience, countless surgeries, lives saved, and crises navigated. None of it could be undermined by prejudice or ignorance. Today, like every day, she would rise above it. And maybe, just maybe, this man would finally learn what it meant to underestimate the wrong person. Olivia Freeman didn't waste a second. She pushed past the lingering whispers and judgmental stares, stepping into the operating room like she owned every second of it. The lights above blazed down, sterile and blinding, but they didn't intimidate her. She thrived in this chaos, the place where life and death balanced on her hands. "Prep him fast, we don't got time," Olivia barked, voice firm, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. The patient, a middle-aged man with traumatic brain injury, lay on the table, monitors beeping erratically. Nurses and residents scrambled, obeying her commands, the room humming with urgent energy. Behind the sterile masks, though, she could still feel the weight of earlier insults pressing on her mind. The paramedic's sneer, the words dripping with ignorance, questioning her competence just because of her body, lingered in her thoughts. She let it fuel her, not break her. Every incision, every movement, every decision had to be precise. This wasn't a place for ego or doubt. This was a battlefield of skill, and Olivia was a seasoned warrior. Frank Williams hovered nearby, steady as ever, offering subtle support. "You got this, Doc," he muttered under his breath, almost invisible to the others. Olivia nodded, acknowledging him, letting the reassurance wash over her. She didn't need validation from the paramedic, but from people who respected her skill, that mattered. The room was tense. A young resident hesitated with the scalpel. Olivia's eyes snapped up, sharp as a whip. "Hand it over! Now! Hesitation kills, you know this." The kid's hands trembled, but under her watchful gaze, he passed the tool. Olivia could see the respect forming in their eyes. Not for her appearance, not for titles, but for the sheer authority of competence. She moved deliberately, checking vitals, giving instructions, anticipating complications before they even surfaced. Every move was surgical poetry, a display of years spent mastering her craft. And yet she couldn't ignore the lingering presence of the paramedic lurking near the doorway. He hovered, awkward and uncertain, probably thinking he was there to supervise. In reality, he was witnessing firsthand what skill and courage looked like. The very person he had mocked was saving a life while he contributed nothing. "BP dropping, Doc," a nurse called, sweat glinting on her forehead. Olivia's mind clicked into hyperfocus. "Push fluids, epi at the ready. I want eyes on that monitor, now." Her commands were sharp but controlled, each syllable weighted with authority. Every heartbeat mattered. Every second counted. As she worked, she caught Ava's wide eyes peeking through the observation window. Her daughter clutched Frank's arm for comfort, little hands shaking. Olivia allowed herself a fraction of a smile. This was what she fought for. Not accolades, not respect from fools, but to show the next generation that courage and skill aren't measured by superficial judgments. Ava was watching, learning, seeing firsthand that resilience and competence aren't optional. They're essential. The paramedic shifted uncomfortably. Olivia noticed, though she didn't look at him directly. Let him stew in the realization that he had misjudged her. Let him grapple with the shame he didn't even know was coming. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very life he might have doubted she could save was now being preserved under her hands. He had mocked the wrong doc. Hours blurred. Olivia's focus never wavered. She guided the team with surgical precision, anticipating every complication, adjusting for every tiny variable. The patient stabilized slowly, vitals evening out, color returning. Sweat dripped from her brow, but she barely noticed. This was what she lived for. The hum of machines, the critical decisions, the weight of responsibility, and the triumph of saving life despite chaos. When the final suture went in, she leaned back slightly, taking a deep breath. The room exhaled collectively, tension melting into relief. Nurses exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the mastery they had just witnessed. Olivia allowed herself a small smile, not for pride, but because the patient would wake up, because the team had learned something beyond textbooks, and because the paramedic's smug attitude had finally met reality. Ava rushed in moments later, eyes wide with awe, clutching her mother's hand. "Mom, you did it," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Olivia crouched down, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's face. "Yeah, baby, we did it. That's what focus, skill, and believing in yourself can do." The paramedic lingered in the corner, silent. He had no words, no excuses. Olivia knew that one day he might understand the depth of his misjudgment, the cost of arrogance. But for now, she didn't need to explain. Her work spoke for itself. The patient's life had been saved, dignity had been upheld, and a lesson had been delivered. Sometimes the people you doubt the most are the ones who quietly change the world around you. Olivia straightened, washed her hands, and allowed herself a final glance at the team. Respect wasn't demanded. It was earned. And today, every eye in that OR had seen what earned respect looked like. As she walked out, the paramedic still rooted to the spot. Olivia felt the familiar fire in her chest, the same fire that had carried her through years of training, prejudice, and doubt. She was Doc Freeman. She saved lives, And no words, no sneer, no narrow-minded judgment would ever change that. The surgery was over, but the tension in the hospital didn't magically disappear. Olivia Freeman stepped out of the OR, scrubbed hands still damp, mask dangling loosely around her neck. The fluorescent lights above reflected off polished floors, casting long shadows in the hallways. She could feel the weight of the paramedic's earlier words still lingering in the air, like smoke that refused to clear. He was waiting, leaning against the wall near the nurses' station, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as if challenging her authority. "Doc, you sure you handled that right? People might start thinking you actually belong here," he sneered, tone dripping with judgment. His words were sharp, meant to cut, but Olivia had learned long ago not to let ignorant mouths define her worth. Frank Williams appeared at her side, steady as always. "Back off, man," he said quietly but firmly. "Doc Freeman just saved a life. You think your mouth matters more than that?" The paramedic's smirk wavered, but he didn't back down. Olivia didn't need Frank to fight her battle. Her record, her skill, her presence spoke louder than any insult. "Listen," Olivia said, her voice calm but icy, carrying the kind of authority that cut through pretense. "Maybe you should focus on your job instead of doubting mine. Because while you're busy talking, people are dying. And if you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The paramedic shifted uncomfortably, but Olivia wasn't done. "You know, I saved a kid years ago. That kid's alive today, breathing because of the decisions I made. You probably have no idea whose life you're messing with when you underestimate someone like me." Her eyes locked on his, piercing, unwavering. The room seemed to contract around them, the bustle of nurses and staff fading into the background as the weight of her words landed. A few staff members had gathered, sensing the tension. Some nodded, silent respect in their eyes. The paramedic's face reddened slightly, realizing the gravity of the moment. He had mocked the wrong doc. The one he had tried to humiliate wasn't just competent. She was a lifeline, a master of her craft, and someone whose past had already proven her mettle. Ava, Olivia's daughter, peeked from behind a nurse's station corner, tiny hands clutching a stuffed toy. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and awe. Olivia caught her gaze and offered a small, reassuring smile. She wanted her daughter to see courage, to see someone standing tall when confronted by ignorance, proving that resilience and skill outweighed prejudice every single time. The paramedic finally opened his mouth, probably to sputter some weak excuse or attempt another jab, but Frank cut him off with a raised hand. "Save it," Frank said, tone flat and unwavering. "You don't get to disrespect someone who saved your life once. Not here, not ever." Olivia turned her attention back to the patient charts she needed to review. The adrenaline from the OR was still pumping through her veins, but her mind needed clarity. Every movement, every glance, every decision mattered, because even though she had confronted bias head-on, there were still lives depending on her focus. The paramedic lingered awkwardly, muttering under his breath. Olivia didn't need to look at him to know he was reconsidering every assumption he had made. The quiet satisfaction of seeing ignorance meet reality was subtle but powerful. She didn't gloat. She had learned that skill and competence often silenced arrogance more effectively than words ever could. As she moved toward the next patient, she felt a surge of something deeper. Years of prejudice, microaggressions, subtle dismissals, all of it could have weighed her down, could have made her doubt herself. But standing here, seeing the respect of the staff, feeling the quiet pride in Ava's eyes, she realized that every challenge had forged her into exactly who she needed to be. She passed by the paramedic one last time, Not a word. Just a look. Calm, steady, unshakable. That glance carried the truth he would never forget. She was not defined by size, gender, or color. She was defined by skill, courage, and the countless lives she had saved. And today, he had learned a lesson he wouldn't be able to unsee. The hospital hallways returned to their rhythm. Phones buzzing, monitors beeping, staff moving with purpose. But the moment lingered, a silent acknowledgement that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. Olivia Freeman had earned it, every day of her life, and no amount of prejudice could ever strip it away. Ava ran up to her mother, hugging her legs tightly. "Mom, you're amazing," she whispered. Olivia crouched down, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. "Yeah, baby, but remember, it ain't about being amazing. It's about doing the work, standing up, and never letting ignorance make you doubt your worth." As they walked toward the exit together, Olivia felt the familiar fire in her chest, the fire that had carried her through years of doubt, microaggressions, and outright discrimination. The paramedic had tried to belittle her, undermine her, but the doc he thought he could mock had already proven who was in control. Olivia Freeman wasn't just a neurosurgeon. She was a testament to resilience, skill, and unshakable courage. The day after the surgery, Olivia Freeman walked through the hospital corridors like she owned them. Not out of arrogance, but out of the quiet authority that comes from having saved lives while others doubted you. Word of her brilliance had already spread. Whispers followed her, eyes darting toward the doc who had just pulled off a near-impossible surgery. Every nurse, resident, and orderly who had witnessed the scene yesterday knew one thing. Skill didn't discriminate, and neither did courage. Frank Williams caught her eye from across the hall and gave her a small nod. "You set 'em straight, Doc," he muttered under his breath. Olivia allowed herself a brief smile but didn't stop walking. There was work to do, patients to see, lives to touch. The recognition could wait. But deep down, the respect and quiet admiration of those who truly understood mattered more than applause. News of her emergency surgery had leaked to the hospital administration. Within hours, a small gathering formed outside the OR. Heads turned, whispers of awe and disbelief mixing with genuine admiration. "Did you see how she handled that case? Unbelievable. Top of her class. No surprise there." Olivia, focused and composed, allowed herself a subtle glance. These weren't empty words. This was acknowledgement from peers who knew the weight of responsibility she carried. The paramedic who had mocked her yesterday lingered awkwardly in the background, trying not to draw attention to himself. The looks on staff faces weren't harsh, but the silent judgment was palpable. He had underestimated the doc, and now the hospital was collectively aware of what he had missed. Olivia didn't need to confront him again. Her actions had already spoken volumes. The subtle fire in her eyes as she moved past him said everything. Ava had come to visit briefly, her small hand gripping Olivia's tightly. "Mom, everyone's talking about you," she said softly, a mix of awe and pride in her voice. Olivia crouched down, brushing a straight curl from Ava's forehead. "That's sweet, baby. But remember, it ain't about what people say. It's about knowing your worth, standing up for yourself, and doing the job right." Ava nodded, absorbing every word, eyes wide as she tried to process the magnitude of her mother's presence in the hospital that day. Hospital administrators approached Olivia, clipboard in hand, attempting to formalize the praise with written commendations and official recognition. She accepted with Doc Freeman, one of the senior doctors said, voice warm with admiration. "You showed all of us what leadership and competence look like. That paramedic yesterday, well, I think he learned a lesson he won't forget. Olivia allowed herself a brief smirk. Some lessons, after all, were learned best by watching rather than listening. Even amidst praise, Olivia didn't forget the lingering tension of yesterday's encounter. The hospital environment, though respectful now, was a reminder that bias existed everywhere, often hidden under polite words or systemic structures. And yet, she thrived on proving that skill, courage, and resilience outweighed prejudice every single time. Her presence was a daily lesson in the power of competence over ignorance. Later, as she walked through the staff lounge, nurses and residents approached with questions, admiration, and curiosity. How did you stay so calm under pressure? You didn't flinch even when he insulted you. Olivia answered patiently, sharing insights, guiding younger staff on both technical skill and professional resilience, teaching them not just medicine, but dignity and strength in the face of ignorance. Ava sat nearby, quietly sketching in a notebook, capturing moments of her mother's composure, perhaps unknowingly memorializing lessons of courage for herself. Olivia caught her daughter's eyes and nodded approvingly. One day, Ava would understand not just the magnitude of her mother's skill, but also the quiet power of standing tall when confronted with prejudice. As the day progressed, the paramedic remained in the background, a shadow of discomfort and realization. He had witnessed firsthand that mocking someone like Olivia Freeman didn't just fail. It exposed his own ignorance. Staff whispered about the irony, but Olivia didn't care about gossip. Her life's work had already made the statement. She had saved a life, educated a team, and set an example her daughter would carry forward. By the evening, as the hospital began to quiet, Olivia found herself in the break room, sitting with Frank and a few other trusted staff members. Conversation flowed around her, but she was calm, reflective. "You handled it like a pro, Doc," Frank said, shaking his head in admiration. Olivia exhaled slowly, tension easing. "It's not about them," she said quietly. "It's about staying true, staying focused, and never letting anyone's ignorance shake what I know I can do." And in that moment, with the hospital settling into a quiet rhythm and Ava's eyes still shining with admiration, Olivia Freeman understood something vital. Recognition wasn't about headlines or applause. It was about the quiet acknowledgement of respect, the trust of colleagues, and the silent lessons imparted to those who watched and learned. She stood, straightened her scrubs, and gave one last glance around the lounge. Every eye that met hers carried respect now, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. The paramedic may have thought he could intimidate her, but Olivia Freeman had shown him and everyone else what it meant to be truly formidable. By the next morning, Olivia Freeman's story had begun circulating beyond the hospital walls. A brief video clip of her confronting the paramedic, combined with footage of her precise, life-saving surgery, had made its way onto social media. Views skyrocketed within hours. Comments poured in. Shock, awe, anger, and admiration intertwined. People couldn't believe the audacity of the man, who had tried to belittle a doc, only to watch her dominate in skill and composure. "Yo, this paramedic trying to act tough, and Doc Freeman handled him like a pro," one user typed. Another wrote, "This is the doc we need everywhere." Smack at people underestimating her. The contrast between ignorance and expertise was too striking to ignore. The paramedic's words, intended to humiliate, had instead become the opening line of a viral lesson in skill, courage, and resilience. Olivia herself stayed focused, checking patient charts, responding to messages from colleagues, and preparing for the next emergency. She didn't need to scroll through feeds or read comments. She had seen firsthand the respect of her team, the trust in her skills, and the pride reflected in Ava's eyes. Still, she couldn't ignore the wave of attention building around her. Every post, every share, every comment reinforced one undeniable truth. The doc he tried to mock was unstoppable. Ava peeked over her shoulder at her mother's tablet, eyes wide. "Mom, people are freaking out online," she whispered, voice tinged with awe and disbelief. Olivia smiled gently, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Yeah, baby. But remember, the noise don't matter. What matters is the work, the lives saved, and showing people the truth with action, not just words." Ava nodded solemnly, taking in her mother's words like a mantra. Meanwhile, the hospital staff became minor celebrities in their own right, hailed for witnessing and supporting Olivia's brilliance. Interviews with local news outlets highlighted not just the surgery, but the confrontation, a moment of raw, unfiltered racism, countered with professionalism, poise, and undeniable expertise. The contrast was stark, almost cinematic. The paramedic's arrogance versus Doc Freeman's unshakable composure and life-saving skill. Frank Williams stayed close, quietly observing the coverage. "Man, people gotta see this," he muttered, shaking his head. "They need to see what happens when someone's blind with ignorance and runs into real talent." Olivia allowed herself a small smirk. She didn't need to prove anything. The world was already doing it for her. Social media, hospital staff, and the public were amplifying what she already knew. She was respected because she earned it. As the day unfolded, Olivia fielded messages of support from colleagues, former mentors, and even patients who had been in her care years ago. The flood of recognition was overwhelming, but also a powerful reminder. Her resilience in the face of blatant prejudice had inspired more than just her daughter or immediate team. It was reaching far beyond the hospital, challenging biases and stereotypes across social boundaries. The paramedic, still in the hospital, was now largely ignored. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Not ridicule exactly, but the quiet acknowledgement of miscalculation. He had underestimated the wrong doc, and now his presence carried the invisible weight of his own ignorance. Olivia noticed him occasionally, but she didn't give him the satisfaction of a glance. Her focus remained on patience, teaching, and ensuring Ava saw what it meant to rise above prejudice. By evening, news outlets had picked up the story, framing it as a tale of courage in the face of racism and judgment. Articles described Olivia's quick thinking, the paramedic's inappropriate comments, and the stark contrast between arrogance and mastery. Social media feeds were filled with posts praising her bravery, intelligence, and unwavering composure, the kind of praise that validated not just her skill, but the larger fight against prejudice in workplaces everywhere. Ava, clutching her mother's hand once more, whispered, "Mom, you're famous." Olivia chuckled softly, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Nah, baby, I'm not famous. I'm just me. But yeah, people are finally seeing what it looks like when someone don't let hate or ignorance hold them down." Ava nodded seriously, soaking in the lesson. The hospital hallways, once tense and filled with uncertainty, now hummed with a different energy: respect, admiration, and quiet acknowledgement. Olivia Freeman had turned a moment of extreme racism into a demonstration of professionalism, courage, and unshakable skill. Her presence alone had silenced doubt, corrected prejudice, and inspired a new wave of respect, both inside and outside the hospital walls. Even as night fell and the city outside carried on obliviously, Olivia remained a beacon of competence and resilience. Her work had saved lives, and her response to discrimination had set an example far beyond the hospital. The paramedic's ignorance, once loud and demeaning, now existed only as a shadow against the radiance of skill and courage. Ava, finally resting in her mother's arms, whispered, "Mom, you're my hero." Olivia kissed her daughter's forehead, heart swelling with pride. "And you're mine, baby. But remember, real heroes don't let words or hate shake them. They rise, they fight, and they prove the world wrong with action." The doc smiled, knowing that today the lesson had reached not just Ava, not just the hospital staff, but countless others who had seen the viral video. Prejudice had been exposed, ignorance had been humbled, and a life had been saved. Olivia Freeman had shown, once again, that true respect is earned through skill, courage, and unwavering resilience. By the next morning, Olivia Freeman's story had gone national. News crews flooded the hospital lobby, cameras rolling, microphones pointed at the doc who had single-handedly saved a life while facing blatant prejudice. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with curiosity, admiration, and a subtle undercurrent of outrage. Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who had confronted ignorance head-on and emerged unshaken. Olivia navigated the chaos like a seasoned pro, mask dangling, eyes sharp, and hands steady. She wasn't just a neurosurgeon. She was a symbol of competence, resilience, and quiet authority. Frank Williams flanked her, offering a protective presence as she stepped toward the throng of reporters. One journalist pressed, "Doc Freeman, how did you stay so composed when that paramedic insulted you?" Olivia's eyes swept over the crowd, calm yet commanding. "Look, I didn't let ignorance shake me. My focus is on saving lives. That's what matters. Words don't define me, actions do." The crowd murmured in approval, nodding and scribbling notes. Every word was measured, precise, yet carried the weight of experience and dignity. Behind the cameras, the paramedic shuffled uncomfortably, trying to hide, realizing that the spotlight had shifted entirely. He had hoped to intimidate, to mock, and instead he was being publicly overshadowed by the very doc he had tried to humiliate. Olivia didn't need to address him directly. The presence of authority and skill around her made his irrelevance clear. Ava clung to her mother's hand, small but wide-eyed, absorbing the scene with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Mom, they're all looking at you," she whispered. Olivia crouched, brushing her daughter's hair back, offering a soft, reassuring smile. "Yeah, baby. But remember, it's not about being looked at. It's about standing tall, even when people try to bring you down." Ava nodded, gripping her mother's hand tighter. Learning lessons of resilience she'd carry for the rest of her life. The cameras zoomed in as Olivia continued to answer questions, her voice steady, eyes unwavering. Every answer reinforced the narrative. Skill, focus, and courage triumph over prejudice. She emphasized teamwork, the patient's recovery, and the importance of not letting personal biases cloud judgment in critical situations. The hospital staff stood nearby, proud and supportive, their presence amplifying the weight of her words. Meanwhile, whispers and murmurs of the paramedic's misjudgment spread like wildfire. Staff members subtly shook their heads at him, some pointing discreetly to remind him of his miscalculation. Olivia could feel the tension, the almost tangible recognition that he had underestimated someone capable, someone who had saved lives under pressure he could only pretend to understand. By mid-afternoon, the story had reached social media feeds nationwide. Clips from the hospital cameras, combined with snippets of the confrontation, had gone viral. People shared posts with captions like, "This doc didn't just save a life, she shut down ignorance." Another, "You don't mess with competence and skill," and Dr. Freeman proved it. The public was enraged at the paramedic's arrogance, but inspired by Olivia's composure. As the news coverage intensified, Olivia and Frank guided Ava to a quieter hallway, away from flashing lights and microphones. "Mom, people are saying you're a hero," Ava whispered, clutching her stuffed toy. Olivia smiled softly, kneeling to meet her daughter's eyes. "Baby, it ain't about fame. It's about standing your ground, doing your job right, and showing people the truth. That's the kind of hero I want you to be." Ava nodded solemnly, absorbing every word like a lesson etched in stone. The paramedic, now clearly aware of the national attention, attempted to slip through a side exit unnoticed. But the hospital staff subtly blocked his path, a quiet reminder that actions, respect, and skill always outweigh arrogance and prejudice. Olivia didn't look at him. She didn't need to. His irrelevance had already been cemented. Olivia turned back to face the cameras one last time before heading to the elevator. Focus on what matters. Ignore ignorance. And remember, respect is earned, not given. The words landed like a hammer, clear, concise, and impossible to ignore. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every nuance, every syllable of authority and conviction. Back in the elevator, Olivia allowed herself a brief moment to exhale. Ava leaned against her, small hands gripping her mother's arm. "Mom, you're incredible," she said quietly. Olivia kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Nah, baby. Incredible is standing up, doing your work, and never letting anyone's hate or ignorance shake you. That's what matters." As they rode up to their floor, the hospital lobby below buzzed with cameras, whispers, and admiration. Olivia Freeman had become more than a neurosurgeon. She was a symbol that skill, courage, and resilience don't bend to prejudice, that the ignorant will always be exposed when confronted with competence, and that sometimes the quiet strength of a doc can speak louder than any words ever could. The hospital corridors had finally quieted down, the storm of cameras, reporters, and whispers fading like a passing storm. Olivia Freeman leaned against the wall outside her daughter's small hospital playroom, scrubs slightly rumpled, mask hanging loosely around her neck. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The adrenaline that had carried her through surgery, confrontation, and media frenzy was finally ebbing, leaving behind a profound mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. Ava peeked around the corner, clutching a small stuffed toy and her notebook. "Mom, can we go now?" she whispered, voice tentative. Olivia smiled softly, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. "Yeah, baby, let's get out of here." Hand in hand, they made their way to the quiet hospital garden, a rare pocket of calm amid the chaos. The garden smelled faintly of spring blooms, a sharp contrast to the sterile scent of disinfectant lingering in the halls. Sunlight filtered through leaves, casting dappled patterns across the pavement. Olivia breathed in deeply, savoring the moment. Here, away from cameras and judgment, she could finally process everything. The surgery, the confrontation, the viral attention, and the quiet humiliation of the paramedic who had underestimated her. Ava ran ahead, small sneakers scuffing the ground, before turning back to grin at her mother. "Mom, people are saying you're amazing online." Olivia chuckled softly, crouching to meet her daughter's eyes. "Baby, Listen, it ain't about being amazing. It's about standing tall, doing your work, and never letting anyone's hate shake you. That's what really matters. Ava nodded, absorbing every word, her young face set with a mixture of awe and determination. Sitting on a nearby bench, Olivia let her thoughts drift. She remembered the paramedic's words, dripping with ignorance and condescension. "Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform." The memory still burned, but instead of anger, it fueled her resolve. Every insult, every doubt cast her way had been met with competence and courage, turning prejudice into a lesson for everyone watching. Staff, bystanders, and now a national audience. Frank Williams appeared quietly. Ava climbed onto the bench beside her mother, leaning against her. "Mom, do you think that paramedic will ever realize he was wrong?" Olivia thought for a moment, staring at the sunlight glinting off the garden path. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter. What matters is that we know the truth, and the people who matter see it. Sometimes ignorance don't learn, but courage, skill, and action, that speaks for itself. Ava nodded solemnly, gripping her mother's hand tighter. The moment stretched, quiet and reflective. Olivia allowed herself to feel the weight of her actions, the lives saved, the lessons taught, the respect earned. She didn't need validation from the ignorant or the biased. The knowledge of her skill and the pride in her daughter's eyes were enough. Her work, her choices, and her courage had spoken louder than any insult could. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Olivia closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. For once, she allowed herself a quiet sense of triumph. Not arrogance, not showmanship, just the deep, abiding knowledge that she had stayed true to her values and her skill. She had protected life, defended her dignity, and silently humbled someone who had tried to diminish her worth. Ava broke the silence, eyes shining. "Mom, you're my hero." Olivia leaned down, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And you're mine, baby. But remember, being a hero ain't about being famous. It's about standing up, doing your job right, and proving the world wrong with action." Ava nodded, determination flickering across her young face. They sat together for a while longer, the garden offering a rare sanctuary. Olivia reflected on the cascade of events over the past 2 days: surgery, confrontation, viral recognition, and understood something crucial. Resilience and skill aren't just about saving lives. They're about teaching, inspiring, and showing the next generation that ignorance and prejudice can never overpower competence, courage, or integrity. The paramedic, somewhere in the background, remained a silent witness to all of it. He had underestimated Doc Freeman, tried to mock her, and now existed as a shadow against the undeniable light of her skill and character. Olivia didn't dwell on him. She had bigger lessons to impart, starting with Ava. As the sun dipped lower, casting warm golden light over the garden, Olivia stood, brushing off her scrubs. Ava mirrored her, small hands gripping her mother's. "Let's go home, maybe," Olivia said softly. Ava nodded, excitement mingled with awe. Together, they walked away from the hospital, leaving behind whispers, judgment, and ignorance, stepping into a world that had witnessed true skill, courage, and unshakable dignity. The following week, Olivia Freeman returned to the hospital, her presence calm yet commanding. The viral story had settled into headlines, social media discussions, and staff conversations. But for Olivia, the focus remained on the work, the patients, the surgeries, and the quiet acts of courage that defined her every day. Fame and recognition were secondary. Competence and integrity were her currency. Walking through the hallways, she noticed subtle changes. Colleagues offered nods of respect. The paramedic avoided direct eye contact, and even new staff seemed to recognize her reputation before she spoke. It wasn't about ego. It was acknowledgement, earned through skill and resilience. She had faced blatant prejudice, confronted ignorance head-on, and emerged not just unshaken, but stronger. Ava tagged along for a quick visit, her small hand gripping her mother's. "Mom, everyone's still talking about you," she whispered. Olivia smiled, crouching to meet her eyes. "Baby, remember, it ain't about what people say. It's about showing up, doing your job, and proving the world wrong with action. Words don't define us. Actions do." Ava nodded, determination in her gaze, already absorbing the lessons of courage and resilience that her mother embodied. In the staff lounge, Frank Williams and other veterans of the hospital's daily grind shared quiet words of admiration. "Doc, you didn't just save a life. You set a standard," Frank said, shaking his head. Olivia accepted the praise humbly. "We all do what we can, Frank. But yeah, sometimes you gotta stand up and let the ignorant know they can't define you." The paramedic, still lingering in the background, had grown noticeably quieter. He had tried to belittle Doc Freeman, and the public exposure, combined with her undeniable skill, left him with nothing but a lingering sense of humiliation. Olivia didn't need to remind him. The world had already done that. His arrogance had met a force too strong to bend. Competence, courage, and resilience. As the day progressed, the hospital buzzed with normal activity, but undercurrents of respect persisted. Nurses, residents, and even patients' families quietly acknowledged her presence. Olivia's impact extended beyond her immediate work. She had become a symbol of standing tall in the face of prejudice, of letting skill and courage speak louder than ignorance. Later, in a rare moment of solitude, Olivia sat in the garden with Ava. The city outside hummed with life, oblivious to the quiet but profound victories that had unfolded within the hospital walls. "Mom, do you think people will forget about the paramedic's words?" Ava asked. Olivia shook her head slowly. "Maybe some will. But what matters is that we didn't let them define us. Every time someone underestimates you, it's your chance to prove them wrong. And that's a lesson you'll carry forever." Ava leaned against her mother, comforted and inspired. "I want to be like you, Mom," she whispered. Olivia kissed her forehead softly. "You will be, baby. Just remember, it ain't about fighting hate with hate. It's about skill, focus, and standing strong. The rest takes care of itself." By evening, the hospital quieted. Olivia's footsteps echoed softly in the halls, a reminder of her constant vigilance, her dedication, and her unwavering commitment to her craft. The paramedic had faded into the background, a cautionary tale of arrogance and ignorance. Meanwhile, Olivia Freeman's influence continued to grow, not through words, but through actions, courage, and undeniable expertise. The story of confrontation, skill, and resilience reached beyond the hospital. Social media posts, local news segments, and community discussions highlighted the lesson. Prejudice is powerless when met with competence, courage, and integrity. Olivia had faced blatant bias, stood her ground, and inspired countless others to recognize that true respect comes from action, not assumption. In the quiet of her office, Olivia looked at the framed photos of past patients, awards, and moments of triumph. Each one was a testament to skill, perseverance, and resilience. She had saved lives, educated staff, and taught her daughter lessons that went far beyond medicine. Ava, watching her quietly, was already learning what it meant to face prejudice with unwavering strength. The paramedic, a fading shadow in her story, had learned the hard way that ignorance meets resistance when confronted by true skill. But Olivia didn't dwell on him. Her life, her work, and her legacy were far greater than one moment of malice. She had demonstrated the power of courage, competence, and dignity, and those lessons would ripple outward for years to come. As Olivia and Ava walked toward the exit, the sun dipping low over the city skyline, she felt a quiet pride, not for the recognition, not for the viral attention, but for the knowledge that she had stood firm, protected lives, and shown her daughter, the hospital staff, and the world that prejudice could never define someone like her. Olivia Freeman wasn't just a neurosurgeon. She was a living testament to the strength, skill, and resilience that define true heroes.